Well, it's Gerald Duran back to you from the community at CanaGlobal, and I was just being tutored by my friend, and he was tutoring me how to say his name. Tell me, how do you say your name?
Anebi.
Anebi. How do you say it?
Anebi.
Everybody's seen this on some show, and I'm just beyond hope in getting this right. But welcome, my dear friend. He lives out in the Phoenix area with me. He's also somebody into the accelerator. He's an established entrepreneur. He has an amazing story. So introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. My name is Anebi Agbo. I am the founder of Icon Labs. And that's Icon. I can't even spell it. Eikon. Icon. Image, right? We're made in the icon of God.
Love it.
And Icon is a web design and development consultancy. I offer fractional consulting hours for product and project management with founders. And then we also offer web design and development services. I have been stateside for about 8 years. I moved out here directly from Nigeria. I am Nigerian, and it's been quite a journey. I've been working in tech, always have been interested in technology, but really started working professionally in the field about 7 years ago. I am a believer. I became a believer, I would say, in 2010. I grew up in a Christian household, always, struggled with the assurance of salvation. Like I knew God was real. I knew God was there. But for my own self, I hadn't really, felt that assurance that I was indeed saved up
Wow.
until, October 30th in 2010, 2011. I have to check my journal to confirm the exact date. But at that one of the days, one night, I was reading an excerpt from C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, and he talked about a demon is talking to his nephew, and he was giving ways, to steal a Christian's faith, the patient, as I refer to the Christian in there. And for the first time in my life, I saw word for word. I was like, I have thought all of these thoughts before. So those weren't my thoughts. That was Satan trying to steal my joy and steal my assurance of salvation. So for the first time really in my life, I would say that was when I was like, wow, this is what has been happening. So I got to pray, and after that, but that was like a line drawn in the sand. That was a benchmark in my life where, I instead of seeing myself as a servant, because I think that was the viewpoint I had of myself. Like I knew God was real, He existed, but it was more from a place of I'm a servant, versus seeing myself as a son of God, an adopted son. So I think the pivot in my mind really happened at that point. And again, it's been year after year just growing in that assurance and operating from that space. So when you ask me who I am now, I think, I'm a son of God, and
Wow.
and that's how I want to operate.
So how did you because you came from a church environment, is that you grew up Christian? So
Yeah.
was it that particular church that you went to that preached that you're never good enough or you can lose your salvation, or how did those ideas formulate in your head of who God is and how He operates?
It's very interesting. I wouldn't say it's the church I grew up in, because I mean the church that they had altar calls. It was an evangelical church, so there was emphasis on preaching the gospel, and living a holy life, and all of that stuff. But I think it was more so an internal struggle I had with, you could say I overthought things. So I think I thought, right, that once you became saved, there was this aha moment, like Paul, right? Saul who became Paul, like,
Right.
you this bright light, you're struck blind, you're like, something really happened here. But I never really felt that, all through, prayer. My mom would pray with me. And I would say my mom's prayers were also instrumental over the years of getting me to that point. But I just always thought there had to be something more, right? That made me feel clean, that made me feel forgiven. And I think I struggled with the fact that I didn't really feel different.
Huh.
So
You know,
that
you
was the
know,
hang up for me.
I had, very similar when I grew up. The church that I grew up in was very legalistic, and I was in church school. Every a couple times a year, they'd bring in these uh, like evangelists to come preach to all the young kids, and he'd scare the crap out of us that we were going to go to hell. And so, I was getting saved 3 or 4 times a year because they'd bring these guys in that would preach hell, and it's and so for I would say for many really until I started my first business and became an entrepreneur, I believed in God, but I don't think I really had a relationship with him that was positive. He kind of seemed like this mean guy that I used to say, it doesn't feel like you love me. We're born into sin. It's almost like, you're up there looking at rats in a maze, that are doomed to fail. And I just didn't get it. And it really wasn't until I think I've told you before when I started my first company, and for a year I didn't make any money, and I started crying out to God, and it was really in my pain that where He gave me peace, and He started dealing with like my reality of my life, and He showed me that He was involved. I would say though that just reading the Bible for myself gave me a completely different picture of who God is and who I am. And I don't know if you've ever heard Christians say this, and I think they say this well meaningly, but they'll say, had to convince me way back when I started doing that. God had to convince me that, and He did, that my business and whatever success I had came from Him because He was my provider. And He showed me Matthew 6:33. He says, you got to put me first. He says, if you think you've made the money and you've done that, you're wrong. It's been all me. I could have taken a rock and gotten better results. That was kind of his message to me, And so, and so what's amazing is even though it did occupy a lot of my time, and it always has, it doesn't stop God's provision. In fact, one of the things I have found in seasons where everything is working, I'm really not toiling that much. People say, in fact, in my best of best years, I play a lot of golf. Isn't that amazing? And so so one of the things I've learned through meeting these people, strangers, and I've developed all these amazing friendships along the way, is that people describe themselves as being in between seasons. They've left one season, one wineskin for another wineskin. They've kind of gone from faith to faith. But when you're trying to go into the proverbial promised land, like the children of Israel, what a lot of Christians have experienced and are afraid of is that they're just going to die in the desert. They can't seem to get an open door. And so have you ever, so I want to talk about open and closed doors. And you probably as a Christian, you've heard about people say, that God closed the doors or God opens the doors. Can you
Yeah.
think of a time when you were praying for some doors to open and they didn't? Have you ever had that?
I can probably, think through that. Even to be honest, like coming stateside, right? For the longest time, in Nigeria, I went to high school in Nigeria. I went to college for a couple of months in Nigeria, but I got robbed, and like it was we're on strike, in between seasons, and waiting for school to reopen. I was in an off-campus residence, and a bunch of armed robbers, robbed us. And for me,
Wow.
that was the last straw. So I went. My mom is a professor back in Nigeria, so I went back home, became her assistant. So I was a computer guy, helping in the department, and I had a stipend. But in that season, I was praying for open doors. I was exploring, other schools. I was exploring schools in Europe, in Canada, and a bunch of other places that we could afford. Ideally, I would have had to get a scholarship to be able to afford any of those things. But in that season, it was, I'd go for an interview with the school counselors, sometimes to travel around the world. And whenever they were in Nigeria, I'd go for interviews, meet up with them, and it looked like, oh, this is a door, and then they're like, but here's a price tag after a scholarship, and boom, that's a door shut because it was too expensive, it was beyond reach, and again and again and again. And I just remember praying this heartfelt prayer, like, God, I need a miracle. And I probably said a lot more things than that, but I just remember it was a heartfelt prayer. Because for me, I was like, I want to be able to have a good education, have a good life so I can. So my mom is a widow. My dad died 24 each years ago. So that was pretty important for me to be able to be set up for success so I could help my mother and my family. I was like, Lord, you know why I'm desiring this. It's not so I can have a bunch of money to waste and do whatever. It's so I can take care of others. Blessed to be a blessing. Um, and one of my, a friend, my mom's friend, ended up like, paying for. She was like, hey, pick a school anywhere in the world, and I'll pay your tuition.
Wow.
So that was like the door blown right open.
Wow.
Like blown off the hinges, and no, that opened up opportunity for me. And again, in the same vein, like shortly after that as well, while I was looking, I found out that I had applied for a green card in the United States, and I had been selected for an interview for that process. So I went for the interview, and that's how I became a permanent resident of United States of America. And my mom's friend was able to help cover some of my costs for a year, and then I started working, and I could afford it for myself. And she ultimately said, "Hey, you don't have to pay anymore. I can now cover my expenses." So that I look back now and I see a series of things had to line up, and I see God orchestrating things through all of that. Multiple doors had to open and align in a
Wow.
short amount of time. So that's one thing I can think of where I was in the desert season, like I was robbed, I had to drop out of school because it's like, okay, this is ridiculous. And then all of that happened. So that's one thing I can
So
think of.
you're in you're in this. Is there just a lot of crime where you were from?
Yeah, some areas worse than others, but yeah, I mean, there's crime and you can't really follow up, right? You go to the police, they drag their feet, but they don't really check into things. So
What
it's
was your view of America from being in? I mean, you know, there's such a movement right now inside America to hate America. I mean, there really is. But everybody I know that's a foreigner, I mean, wants to come here.
yeah.
They was it the land of opportunity? Why America? Why not someplace else?
That's what it looks like. I was actually looking, I looked at America as beyond reach and expensive. So I was actually looking at, some parts of Europe and Canada. But a family friend was like, hey, you have nothing to lose, apply for this DV1 diversity visa. And it's like, I was reluctant, but I ended up applying and I thought, there's no way I can get a chance. Sent all my documents. So you have to be qualified. I sent all my documents. But I still forgot about America. I was looking at Canada, and one of the questions when my mom's friend asked me to explore schools was, "Are you a U.S. citizen or permanent resident?" So that was the only reason why I remembered, America. And I checked, and I discovered I had been, invited for my final interview. And it's like, I think it was one more week or so for it to expire. I had to log into USCIS to find that out. We almost missed it. But yeah, still, I think America from the outside looking in, it does look like the land of opportunity where if you work hard, right, you get returns for your labor. There are many countries, Nigeria included, where yes, you can work hard and see success, but I feel like there are less tools, there's less infrastructure, right? You
Do
pay for
you do
water,
you
but you can't
believe that if
underfund
you
it.
work hard, you could be successful in America? Do you believe it?
I do believe that.
Do you know
Uh,
that's a microaggression?
Explain that. When you say that's a
That that is actually,
microaggression.
I was just reading that this morning. That's considered very racist to say that, and it
I
just
mean, I'm black. I can't be racist, can I?
I'm brown. I'm brown. I think the same thing. You know, it's also interesting. So, how did you learn how to code? How did you become a software developer?
So when I moved, I've always been interested in computers, but at an early age. So my brother just passed away, and he was the reason why I got interested in computers. He died
Wow.
what March 16th, so that's not too long ago.
No,
I'm like, I
sorry.
don't know what day today is. Uh, so March 16th, my brother passed away, and but growing up, right, my brother super like obsessed with computers and tech. So I
Wow.
remember waking up at night and seeing my brother teaching himself how to type on a typewriter, and then eventually there were computers,
Wow.
and then he had a bunch of laptops. He was always fixing. People would bring them to him. He had desktops, towers, tearing down, rebuild it, solder it together. I grew up, loving the smell of a soldering iron because I smelled it so much. I shared a room with my brother. So
Yeah.
I think at an early age, that really gave me a liking and a love for computers. All I wanted to do back then was, learn how to bypass the passwords, so I could play games on the computer. I wish I started coding back then, but still, I think it instilled in me like just that desire to get into tech. Um, so it's something I've always, played around with. However, when I moved stateside about 8 years ago now, my dad has a third cousin out here who introduced me to his friend who worked in IT. He was
Wow.
the business intelligence developer or consultant. And I started meeting up with him. He was taking me to Barnes and Noble. We meet up at Barnes and Noble. He'd give me like coding assignments in SQL, SQL, depending on who you're talking to. Can't speak, manipulating databases, right? Creating new records and creating reports. So that really got me started. I was more or less like his protege for like a year or so, learning
Now,
the
did you
ropes.
get paid well in that?
Initially, no.
Okay, I love
Initially, it
that
was
because you were
pure
willing to
sweat
put in the
equity.
time.
Yeah, like I was working a job about 30 hours a week. I was doing school, so it was in between all of that. I was staying up at night. His name is Ayo. If he watches this, shout out to you, Ayo. Uh, because really, I think he changed the trajectory, right, of my life here. Because I had this linear mindset, right? I go to school, I get my degree, maybe get an internship, get a job. It was very linear,
Yeah,
but he really
that's
expanded
called the
my realm.
American dream. But
Yeah,
it's not. It doesn't work out that way anymore.
yeah. He really expanded my mind, my mindset, right? Really, expanded the horizon of possibilities for, hey, obviously it was like keep doing school, but if you work with me on this, right, you can get a high paying job sooner than later. So I worked with him, trusted the process. I was staying up late at night, 12 a.m., 2 a.m., like trying to figure out queries for databases. And after about 8 months or so of doing that, I got my first professional gig as a developer at a real estate company. And I remember getting my first paycheck, and I was like, is this real?
Now, I think if I remember right with your story, like so many other tech entrepreneurs, you didn't finish college, right?
No, I do. I have an associate's now, and a lot of coursework at NAU, but still I don't have a bachelor's degree. I have an
So,
associate.
so you talk about breaking all the rules. See, I'm the same way. It's like I've, I never went to college, but it's ironic that in my business turnaround career, I turned around colleges and bought and sold for-profit colleges. So, you know, and I think that it's when you know who you are, and because in the time we've spent together, I know you have purpose, and I know that God is showing you what He's doing in your life, and what He's showing you that, and so clearly He's opened some amazing doors. And
Totally.
one of the things that strikes me about like your story. The first time I heard it, we went to lunch and we had this. What was the name of that place? It was a fabulous place.
Oh man, what's the name? Fate Brewing Co.
I'm actually scheduled to go there with the what is it, the Kingdom Analytics guy? I forget.
Awesome,
Yeah, of all
awesome.
places, I thought, man, that was such a good sandwich. And so in the next week or so, we're I'm driving out
That's cool.
your way to there. But what's interesting about your story, I find it fascinating because you know, I just know it's not especially easy to get into the United States. I know that a lot of people want to come here, and it's not especially easy. And
I mean, mine took 2 or 3 years, the whole process. If you want to do it legally, that is, it took me about. I started the process, I think, in 2010 or 11. I have to check my paperwork. But I finally came out here in 2013.
and you
So
said you look at what you've accomplished. I mean, the idea that that you're a tech founder and from another country, and in really a short period of time, you're on this amazing trajectory, and it hasn't been this linear path where it's just hey, you go to college. I mean, it's why in the late 90s I started the first coding camp in America, because we realized we could teach people to do this and be software developers, and we were taking smart people from all kinds of different vocations that it just, you wouldn't have thought that because of their vocation that they were that smart, and not everybody that came to coding camp didn't have I would say probably about 50% had a degree, but they weren't they didn't have a great, the degree no longer bought them the great job. And I think that's one of the things that's changed with the American dream. It used to be that if you went to college, got an
yeah,
education, you were going to be kind of assured this great job, raise a family, buy a home, American dream. And
yeah,
the the Xers are probably the first the first generation that that were like, wait a minute, where's our great jobs? And then of course the millennials too. But you got, one of the things I love about your story is that you took the time to prepare all that work, because you were doing like an internship, and in the early days for free, right? You were just investing
yeah.
your time in yourself, with no absolute promise of anything except you were going to learn. And
And
you know,
I had no idea I was gonna, work out like. I think I really one of the biggest gifts, apart from taking the time to teach me stuff, was believing in me, right? And there were times I was like, is this worth it? I say, hey, just keep going, keep pushing on. So that was super, that was key for him. Like he had the vision, right? And he helped me catch that vision for what
now,
was possible.
when did you leave your full time? Because you weren't always, you were, if I remember right, you had some full time gigs, and then you were doing kind of the side hustle, right? Is that your
Yeah,
story? But you left the
yeah.
full time thing to open up your company and to do it full time. How long ago was that?
So it's funny because we're in April now. And that was earlier this year.
Okay.
Yeah, so pretty recent, right? I was doing full time. I was working as a consultant. I worked at American Express. Worked as a consultant all through last year. And early this year, I was this like it's time. It's time to step out in faith and
Why
do this thing full
most
time.
people would say, Maybe you had a great, your American Express, like you should have just settled. Why do you want more?
For me, like one thing, if it's just about myself, right, about me and my immediate family, like totally, hey, we're cool, good paycheck, good benefits, but like it is a lot more than that. It's the hope and the vision to build something more than myself. You
Yeah.
know, build a company that creates employment for others. In There's a word like tzaddikin. I think that's like in Hebrew, which is like this idea that when the tzaddikin prosper, the city rejoices. So it's like I want to build a good company, a good entity that employs people, that makes a profit, so that we can in turn like bless others, bless our immediate family, bless others for the needs they have. So that for me is the key driver, right? Building a successful business that in turn blesses others. So that's I can't do that with full-time employment. I could keep it a side hustle or freelancing, but it's not gonna grow uh, like I'm hoping it does. Like I believe it does actually, that it will.
Yeah.
So that's a key driver for me. Just building something much more than myself. So it's not just about me and my immediate family, but it's like it's a machine that can serve, others, a vehicle to serve others.
When one really understands biblical prosperity, um, prosperity goes hand in hand with generosity. And certain people have that in their spiritual DNA where money isn't just about enriching themselves, it's about helping others. And I think, and I think it's very rare, but when you develop that, the amount you give actually becomes more important than the amount you make. And that's a fascinating thing. And that's what my wife and I have experienced over the years where we, even though, of course, we are not unaware of what our company's making and all that. We know that. But the big number that we were praying for always wasn't our revenue and our personal income. The big number we were praying for is how much we get to give and the projects we
Wow.
wanted to give to. And so we would always have, whether it was a church that we were supporting or different ministries. And then later in life, when we started doing ministries ourselves and putting our own resources into our own projects. In fact, I mean, that's how CanaGlobal got started. I mean, when God put in my heart to leave the business turnaround and build CanaGlobal, and in the beginning, I left all my income behind, and to get CanaGlobal up and running in 2016, I had to spend an enormous amount of money, and I don't like spending enormous amounts of money when I'm not making enormous amounts of money. But
Yeah.
you trust God. You trust God, and so I think the for people that are in this desert season where you're not thriving the way that you were meant to thrive, you're kind of surviving. There's only one reason to survive, and that's to thrive in the promised land. That,
Hmm.
but what I've learned is that door, when it's shut, it's God just saying not yet, and you have to get prepared. And one of the biggest things that I think that we have to understand is our purpose. Where are you in the process of God showing you your purpose and his plan for this next season, that the reason why, I mean, I know you have some big plans, some things that you want to do for Phoenix. You're already involved in, is it Faith Tech? Is that the name of the
Yeah.
Faith Tech?
Faith,
You're
faith tech.
you're a director of the region here, and to really build a hub of faith and tech, and connecting the dots between business purpose, success, and faith. Where are you in your journey of you understanding God's plan and purpose for your life?
Yeah, I think that has been a process of, it's like many times we and me specifically, right? I want floodlights of, it's like stadium lights. I can see everything, but in my life, God just provides, it's like a lamp for your feet. It shows you just a little more, a little bit more. And in this season, having just lost my brother, and I think I began to get this a sense for this. My wife and I have goals. Every year on our anniversary, we look at our marriage goals. We set goals for the year, and yesterday we're just looking at goals for previous year, and I think even the year before that. It's been this recurring theme for me, of feeling that, hey, I feel called to be a blessing to others, to inspire others, to be a catalyst, right? So it was very interesting when I talked with you, when we first met up, and you talked about this idea of many people walking around, pregnant with their dreams.
Yeah.
And it was your vision to, like, hey, let's give birth to that baby, and similar to that, I believe like each person has a God-given potential, and many times we let it sit because we're coasting, we're doing what's safe. And as I step out myself, I just feel strongly for this season, and to be quite honest, for the rest of my life, it's this calling to, not only run well, but just inspire other people, expand your mind on what the horizon of possibilities could possibly be, and and helping people achieve that. It could be setting up an internship or apprenticeship program with my
Which you
company
just
to help
did.
people.
You just got in
Yeah,
your first guy.
so excited for that. It could be that, right? Of people like who would not ideally be able to step in, but I get to encourage them. Or it could be working with people trying to get better jobs so they can give more, right? So they can have more time with their families. Like so, whatever shape or form that takes, the central core of that is just helping people, step into their God birth potential and living that out, not hiding under any, any smoke screens or uh,
There's two
limitations.
kinds of believers on the planet: those who know why they're on the planet, and those who don't. And the statistics also in the research say that, well, almost 100% of Christians believe God has a plan and purpose for their life. 80% cannot tell you what it is. And I think that number is probably even higher. And so, why do you, I mean, why do you suppose if people believe God has a plan and purpose, they're okay not knowing what it is in the Christian community? Why do you think there's so many people that can't tell you or aren't even interested in pursuing God's plan and purpose for their life?
That's interesting. I think one of it is you notice stats, right, of the number of Christians who actually take the time to really dig into the Bible, into God's
Less
word.
than 15%.
Yeah. So I'm like, if you actually genuinely go into God's word and read it for you, not just reading it to tick a box, like if you actually do read it and believe it and want to follow what it says, I think it becomes pretty clear as you go through the story of Scripture, story of the Bible, that God has a plan, right? And you're an actor, I'm an actor, like we're active participants in this story. Story is still going on; it hasn't ended yet.
It hasn't ended.
So I think as we see ourselves as active participants in that story, you're like, okay, now I get to do something, right? So I think that's one thing, and maybe even fear, fear of what could happen. I mean, to be following after God and living out to your full potential, it's a scary thing. Many people, I think, don't even take the time or have the courage to dive in to see what that means because it requires sacrifice. It requires, yeah, sacrifice. I think is an apt word. It
Absolutely.
requires a lot of sacrifice and discipline, and I think many of us are too lazy and scared to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to know what you're. First, it's hard to have a two-way relationship with God if you're not in the Word of God. A lot of people have a one-way relationship where they're praying, but they're really never hearing back from Him because most of us aren't going to hear audibly from God, and we're not going to get writing on the wall. Um, our the way that we're going to hear His voice is we're going to be in the Word, and then the Holy Spirit's going to begin putting thoughts in our head, and we're over time we'll learn to recognize His voice because it'll align with scriptures. But it is a lot of work, and um, in my life, I guess it was um, in the late 90s, somewhere along there. I think 2000. I was CEO or president of one of the fastest growing companies in America in tech education, and so we were really busy growing this company. We had just franchised it, and so but God put on my heart. He gave me some instructions to build a curriculum for what's today His plan, my plan. And I remember, these thoughts, recurring thoughts, were coming into head. I want you to build this curriculum, and I was well suited to do it because we were an educational company. We had a whole, curriculum department, so I knew how to do that. but I just didn't feel qualified to do it. I says, can I write something about being an entrepreneur? I don't know. I mean, I go to church every Sunday. I'm a good volunteer, but I don't know about writing a Christian curriculum. So, it took me a little while. And when God wants to get my attention, he always pulls my financial chain. He yanks it, and, until I listen. And that's what he did. And so I says, okay, I'll create the curriculum. So I actually created this curriculum, his plan, my plan. It was in a beautiful binder. I mean, it looked, it was something that we published, all that. But I was like, what in the world am I going to do with it? And I was going to a big mega church in Kansas City, and I remember that Sunday up on the board they had on the big TVs or the big screens, they had this announcement that they were going to do a purpose program, and it was like everything that was in my program. And so I thought, oh
Wow.
my gosh! And so the next week I called into the church and I says, hey, I'm interested in volunteering for that. Can you give me the name of the pastor or whoever's in charge of that thing? And I met with the guy and I said, I'm interested in helping. And by the way, who's leading this? Who's going to teach this? And they said, we don't know. God's going to give us somebody. And so I said, oh, well, I happen to have this book. I just, and it wasn't his plan, my plan book. It was like a big binder curriculum kind of thing. And when he found what he did, he says, you're going to do it. And that led to God saying, okay, now I want you to take some of your money and build an advertising campaign. Ask the pastor if you can put together an advertising campaign to bring people in from the outside and you'll pay for it. And I says, oh, they said, of course, we'll let you do that. And then that led to God saying, hey, now I want you to start booking hotels. And,
Wow.
I remember the first one I did was at a Sheraton, and I was just thinking, oh, we had, put together a campaign. I'm thinking, no one's going to come. No one's going to come. I just know it. I just, here I am. I spent all this money. No one's going to come. And the place was booked out. Then
Wow.
God told me, I want you to build a program online. So this was, I think when we did that, that was about 2005, 2006, 7, somewhere in there. And you couldn't put a video on YouTube that was longer. I think back then they only allowed you to go like 5 minutes. And so we had to build the servers ourselves. We had to buy all the equipment. I mean, we didn't know anything about this, and we built this online program. And I was like, well, God, how would anybody know about this? And he gave me a strategy, which was a radio strategy, which was at the time I was the biggest buyer of radio in the state of Indiana. And so that's when radio was really big. And he gave me this approach of going to the radio stations and telling them for every paid spot that I buy, I want a free spot in the same time, which they don't do. And but God knew better.
Wow.
And we got, it was $40,000, $50,000 of free radio every month. And in our first, I think it was 9 months, we had like 3,000 people go through it. That's when what I really understood, because I'm in the marketplace, people will listen because I'm an entrepreneur, I'm successful, I'm appointed by God, I'm anointed for this. And it's just, my pastor, I remember saying, he says, Gerald, if I go out into the marketplace, a lot of people ignore me because I'm a pastor. But when you go out and you're a founder, you're a CEO, people open up their ears and they'll say, boy, especially when life hasn't worked out the way you planned it, all of a sudden you go, I wonder what God has had planned for my life all along. That is the key for open doors. And one thing that I would say is we got to watch out. Satan, who is the great counterfeiter,
Hmm.
he'll always create a counterfeit open door when God has a closed door. And he gets so many Christians, and I've gone through that door many times when God has given me a closed door and he says, and you're not ready. And then I see an open door and I just assume it's from God because it looks like it's from God. It matches everything I could have ever imagined, but I don't take the time to vet the door, to pray it through. And that's where because in those times I wasn't willing to prepare first. I got the lesson first, and then I learned a hard lesson after the fact. I got the test first, and then I learned a hard lesson. So Satan opens the doors, but I would say that as we're pursuing our destiny, it's so important. We have this life that it's so important that we get prepared. And you're in the accelerator, and you're in, if I remember right, you just finished module 1 where you were painting out. And by the way, without sharing what your goals are, I would say you were in the top 4 or 5% of the people that walked in the door and were able to have great vision. And I would imagine that's because of what your background was. You have to have big vision, or you'd still be back in the old country waiting, waiting for something to happen. But there's and you're trying to scale your company, and that's why you're in the accelerator.
Yeah.
In the His Plan, My Plan, there's 3 components of it, and there's first the faith part, and there's the first 6 stages are about faith, about bulletproofing your faith. And then after that is 7 and 8, and that's about going after your purpose, God revealing what it is, and then how do you start. And then 9 and 10 are about provision, trusting God to be your provider. And the 10th one is about prosperity and being generous. But it's interesting, when I did this, I could have easily put the purpose part at the beginning, but the problem was I knew people wouldn't have the faith. So I sandwiched it, unless you have the first part in, and that takes a lot of preparation, because, when people admit to me, well, I'm not spending as much time in the Word as I should. By the way, that's code for not at all, a little or not at all. And I'll say, well, I'm just curious, like how much time, it'd be like me if I went to my trainer, and who's back in Wisconsin, Matt, the torturer. And if I asked him, the tormentor of fat people, if I said, this guy was brutal. He used to come to my house, and he'd make me push his pickup truck. While he was, he'd be laughing. I'd be pushing it from behind. And then he'd make me run up and down my hill, I lived in a lake house, carrying I think I'd carry a 45 up and down. Oh my God, this guy's
wow.
But if I saw him today, and he'd say, and I says, oh yeah, Matt, I'm in the gym every single day. I'm working out every single day. He'd give me a funny look, and he'd say, well, just how much time are you spending in there? Because he'd look at me and go, you're not, and you may be going, but you're not, And that's the same thing with, people who don't spend time in the Word. Because you think about it, if one of the top entrepreneurs of this world wanted to meet with you and says, Anebi, I will meet with you every single day. We can get together at 5 a.m. and we can work. You'd meet, that'd be a no-brainer. But here we have the God of the universe, the creator of everything, that wants to meet with us, and people are too busy. And I think that's the preparation that if you want the fruit of the promised land, you have to be prepared. If you're not prepared, you won't know who you are and what God has assigned you to do, and you will never see the fruit of the promised land. You'll only see the giants. And so that's where a lot of people are. What advice? So you've been an entrepreneur for how long? How long has it been?
I
You've
really
been a freelancer
started,
longer, but when you went full time, when was that?
Full time since January.
Okay, so you're relatively new in this. You're doing great. What would be your advice to entrepreneurs or dream chasers out there that are trying to do what you're doing, but can't get the open door, and are frustrated? They're frustrated because they're praying to God. They want vocational and economic freedom, and they want it whether they're an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial in spirit and have a great job, what would you tell them? What's your advice to them?
Yeah. I mean, the numbers for entrepreneurs that fail every year, pretty astronomical. And I think some of that is because so many give up
Yeah.
too soon. So I would say persistence and continuing to iterate on the processes you have, and just tomorrow's got to be better than today, right? And having that mindset that tomorrow will be better than today, and what can I do to make tomorrow better, and doing that again and again, and also seeking out wisdom. Working with you has been, if you talk with me long enough, you hear me use the word inflection point quite a bit. And that's because I feel like in life, there are a series of inflection points. You may miss them if you don't pay attention. So the point is to, optimize to ride the wave with those inflection points, and to learn from them. My brother's death, that's a big inflection point in my
Huge.
life, that I can be stuck in the past and regret of things I could do. I could learn from that, uh, for tomorrow to be better, in my walk with God, in the way I go about business, in purpose, in inspiring others, and being a catalyst. So I would say that's a big thing. Uh, but the biggest thing I would say is, and you say this a lot, is partnering with God and trusting Him. While, in my life, I have taken advantage of opportunities, but there are things that have happened that have not been, even if I worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there's no way those could have happened if not for God orchestrating those. And for me, I would say that's the biggest key. Uh, Working hard and trusting in God, seeking His face, praying, and He will open doors, right? There's
Oh
no.
yeah, I mean, it's like, what's harder for God, to make you a peanut butter sandwich or to open the door to an amazing season? I mean, one's not any harder, than the other. All things are really possible with God, and it's amazing. Even talking to you, you and I have shared discussions about your brother's death, with my son Alex's death, and even though we missed them terribly, where are they today? They're up in heaven with the Lord,
Yeah.
totally healed, totally happy. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with God the morning of my son's celebration service. And I was kind of moping and, oh Lord, poor me, and all this stuff. And he says, your son's up here with me. He's more alive today than he's ever been in his life. He doesn't want to come back. You need to finish the work that I have in front of you, and then you can come up and join him. And those words are so comforting,
Man.
and it gives me energy in my purpose to help equip entrepreneurs and dream chasers to go after their God planted dreams. Because you know, when you're doing something entrepreneurially or in a job and it's in God's purpose, you can't fail. Now, we experience failure when we're learning what doesn't work. But
Yeah.
I don't, we all experience that, right? Every week, experience something with that. And, it's interesting because a lot of you out there know that we were running into two big tech problems. And, it was funny because God told me the morning I posted something, He says, ask for people's prayer. And so I did. I put that out there. And that very same day, we had an idea that outsmarted the help desk. And my son did it. And in 10 minutes, it was fixed. And on the
Uh,
email link issue, I, I think that it actually works now, but for a different reason. But like God knows you can't when you're implementing when you're partnering with God, you cannot fail. There is no plan B. There is His plan. A lot of times, and this is how I started, where I thought my plan was God's plan. I thought I come up with a plan and then I just want God to bless my plan.
there's
And
come a time.
he taught me early in life, I want nothing to do with your plan. And that's where I came up with His plan became my plan. And the three truths I've learned is one, God has a plan on purpose. Two, he's got to tell you what it is. It may not be the way you want to, you're on a need to know basis. So you got to get used to that, right? I liked what you said. He shines the light on your feet, but not, he doesn't show you the whole runway. But the third thing, that the truth that will just change your life, is there's no person, no circumstance, there's no nothing that could stop you except you if you decide not to participate in it. So listen, bud, I really enjoy and I'm thankful that you've taken the time to spend with me and with the folks in the community, and you've done a great job, and I look forward to seeing you progress and build a great,
Thank you.
great company, and a legacy of people that you're multiplying, that just glorifies God. So thank you very much, and we'll see
Appreciate
you
it.
guys out there in the community throughout the week.